are new, my name is Randy Mayeau. We talk about whatever is in the news, and I have a shocking announcement. We have a reading group next Wednesday, not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday. The readings are here. 9 days early. It's a shocking announcement, as I said. All right, I don't know if any of you heard about this. It didn't get much coverage in the news, but the Dallas Cowboys had a football game yesterday. You probably didn't hear, and they won the game. And I don't know what the biggest news from the game is. Here are the options. Number one, the referees made a call and then took the call back, and everybody in the country except the staunchest Cowboys fans are saying that the Lions were robbed. So that's the first comment. The second comment is that Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, was captured hugging Jerry Jones. And the Twitter sphere says that ended his opportunity to become president, right there. He was hugging Jerry Jones. So now, we are all obviously Cowboys fans. I was thrilled that they won their first playoff game in years. Yes. And let me tell you what they're facing next week. They're playing the Green Bay Packers. And this year, the Green Bay Packers have won all 8 home games and lost 0. The Cowboys have won all 8 road games and lost 0. So one of those two teams is going to have either their first home loss or their first road loss of the season. I don't bet on games, but I do read the favorites just to know who the bettors think are supposed to win. And the favorites say that the Packers will beat the Cowboys by 6.5 points. So I hope they're wrong. The betting odds got 2 of the 4 games right this weekend and 2 of the 4 wrong. So we'll see where it goes. So that's my Cowboys update. Who's got a question about the Cowboys? Nobody? All right, let's do our own vote. I'm not asking you who you want to win. The question is, who do you think will win? You've got 3 options. The Cowboys will win. The Packers will win. You don't know. All right, how many of you think the Cowboys will win? How many of you think the Packers will win?
Because of the weather.
But if it is going to be really cold, it's going to be bad on the Cowboys. And they're already printing Ice Bowl, Ice Bowl second, Ice Bowl number 2 t-shirts. That's right. How many of you don't know who's going to win? All right, and I hate to tell you this. This room seemed to slightly think that the Packers are going to beat the Cowboys, in spite of this woman raising both arms at once. So,
I'm just going by the weather. I think the weather is going to be
it's going to be tough if it's really cold. That's right. That's right. So anyway, so that's item number 1. Item number 2, since I was last here, TCU and Baylor both had bowl games. And for those of you who are Baylor fans, yours did not turn out very well. Whereas TCU did very well, and it makes you wonder what if they had been in the Final Four playoffs, but they didn't make it. So that's my football report. Any football comments or questions? Yes?
Who are you picking next Monday night in the championship?
Who am I picking next Monday night in the championship? I'm not an expert, but I think Oregon's going to win. What do you think?
I think so, too.
Yeah, I think Oregon's going to win. Alabama lost, and that was kind of a shock to Alabama folks. And so I think it's going to be Oregon, but we'll see. We'll see. All right. As I have said on many occasions, we never know what the most important news is. And so when I talk about the news, I can tell you what's in the news, but I can't tell you what is the most important. You never know. But today, let me give you the bad news if you had not heard it. It's not good news. Here is the, at this moment, Dow Jones Industrial Average. It is down 338 points. And that is, let's see here, that is nearly 2% down. It's at 17,494. And there are a couple of reasons why the experts, and by the way, the experts never know.
That's right.
I mean, you can ask them, why is the stock market down? And they will give you their current answer for the day, but you never know exactly what causes the stock market to go up or down. But here's the big news. Germany has now stated that they would be okay if Greece got out of the euro. And so what you've got, and let me see if I can, I don't think we can begin to grasp how this affects things. Let's imagine that, and I'm just going to pick one out of the air, the state of Texas went bankrupt. Let's imagine that. And then Texas decided to become its own country and have its own money, but it's not in good shape. It's bankrupt. So what would that do to the U.S. dollar if a state that is as large as Texas pulled out of the dollar? You can see that that would have enormously difficult and bothersome ripple effects. Well, what happens is that Greece is not able to pay its bills. It is not doing well financially. And now there is talk of Greece pulling out of the euro. And no matter how you cut it, even though Germany basically is that, and by the way, Germany is the big dog in the euro. If Germany says it's okay with us, that doesn't mean it doesn't have bad ripple effects. Now, 50 years ago, 70 years ago, if Greece was having money problems, it would not have that big an impact on the United States stock market. We were not as interconnected. But in today's world, every country is interconnected with every other country. And the euro and the United States are intimately connected. And so if Greece ends up basically, and I'm using my language, going bankrupt, they've got to reconfigure everything. And if they get out of the euro, then that ripple effect is going to go into the rest of the countries in the euro, Germany and the other countries. And when that happens, that ripple effect is going to go across the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the United States. So that is piece of the story number one. That's big news. I'm not sure it's the biggest news. I think the bigger news is the price of oil. And if you're not aware of this, oil has now, for today, according to what I just heard on the radio news, it is now under $50 per barrel of oil. It was $107 in June. Its high point briefly this year was $110. So $110 was its high point, and it is now somewhere in the $49 and some cents range. That is a whopping drop. That's not a little bit of a drop, that's a whopping drop. On the one hand, I'm pretty happy. I filled up my car on Saturday for $27. I mean, it was empty. And I filled it to the brim for $27. It was costing me $52 to $54 in June and July. So you can do the math. When I'm spending $54 and now I'm spending $27, that is a 50% drop in my gasoline price. It's nearly now reached the the 50% point. That's just pretty astonishing. On the other hand, they have already started reducing the new drilling going on in the United States and including in the state of Texas. In other words, and I can't draw worth a flip, if you need this much oil and you only have this much oil, then you want to drill for more. But if you have more oil than you need, the price drops. And right now, even though the United States has been going up in output, we are within shouting distance of being able, if we had to have enough oil without any coming from Saudi Arabia. So we are on the verge of becoming oil independent because of the new technology with fracking, getting down further down, able to get more oil out of the ground. And so the news is that we don't need any extra oil. And so I'm going to tell you an interesting story. This is pretty intriguing. I have an iPhone. It's an iPhone 5. The first iPhone hit in 2007. That was 8 years ago. If you had asked somebody to show you their phone in 2006, that's 9 years ago, there's a pretty good chance they would have shown you a phone from a company called Nokia. N-O-K-I-A, Nokia. Nokia pretty much owned the phone market. It was the top seller, and it was the top seller by far. I owned at least 3 different Nokia phones in the early years of cell phone use. In 2007, the iPhone hit, and Nokia has basically disappeared, and the country of Finland, where Nokia was based, has had its economy eviscerated by the decline of Nokia because it was a dominant company in the country. All right, let me see if I can describe this. If you don't need Nokia phones anymore, you quit building Nokia phones. If you don't need oil as much, you don't look for more oil. And this is the interesting part of this story. If you were to ask, how much is Nokia worth? In about maybe early 2000s, they were worth $140 billion. That was the value of Nokia, you know, the kind of value they figure out if you sold all the stock and got all the money, $140 billion. They bought a company. They paid cash for a company that cost them $8 billion. I don't remember the name of the company. I've read about it. And that company's job was to build new cell phone towers in many parts of our country and other parts of the world so that Nokia would be able to have the best signal. Have you seen these commercials with Joe Montana and Bo Jackson and Herschel Walker, and they're making fun of the Heisman pose and the rings from the Super Bowls? All of those commercials are put on by AT&T, arguing that AT&T has the best signal strength. That means if you have a cell phone, you want to go with AT&T. My son and his wife bought new cell phones over Christmas while they were with us. New cell phones. And they went with Sprint. Have you heard of Sprint? It's a company instead of AT&T. They went with Sprint because it was a better deal. 4 days later, they turned them back into Sprint because the receiving, the connection strength was so bad in places they were driving, they couldn't even make a phone call. So Sprint may be fine for Garland, but it may not be fine in between here and other places. So anyway, Nokia bought this. This is really an important story. They bought this company for $8 billion to build this new cell phone tower connection. Before this was half built, new technology came along that meant nobody wanted to use those towers anymore. They never finished building them. And ultimately, Nokia, that spent $8 billion on that one company for better towers, they were worth $140 billion. Ultimately, another company bought Nokia for a total of $7.5 billion, less than what they had paid for this company. In other words, Nokia went bankrupt. They became almost worthless. Now, that's a story repeated over and over again. Why am I telling it related to oil? Do you remember the last 2 or 3 years we've been fighting over something called the Keystone Pipeline? We don't need it. It hasn't been built yet. We don't need it. We now are getting enough oil out of our ground that we don't need Keystone Pipeline to bring us oil from Canada. In fact, the only reason now to build the pipeline is to bring the oil from Canada to make it easier for the Canadian oil to ship overseas, but people aren't going to need that either. The world is changing too rapidly. I've told you this before, but I've been reading up on it since I was last here. Do you know that there are now pretty hefty chunks of places, parts of California, parts of Arizona, where people are getting their electricity almost entirely from solar panels? And it is cheaper than getting their electricity from the electric company from coal-fired plants. And the price of the solar panels is going down about half every 18 to 20 months. In other words, in the not too distant future, the electric company might go out of business. I'm not making that up. The electric company might go out of business. And what do you do when you lose an entire industry? So when you ask me what's the biggest news, the Germany-Greece EU thing is a big deal. The price of oil is a big deal. But maybe the bigger deal is that technology is changing everything. Technology is what's bringing the solar power price down. Technology is what's putting other companies out of business. And everything that has been discovered to do it cheaper and faster today is going to keep getting cheaper and faster. That's pretty big news. That's pretty big news. So who's got a question about oil, Greece, Germany, or technology? Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
Where are we headed then?
Well, we're either heading for heaven on earth or absolute hell on earth. It depends on who you read. Her question was, where are we headed? So let me talk about that for a minute, because it's a really good question. By the way, the reading group, Readings, has an article about how things are really getting better that somebody in here recommended, but I'd already read it. And we've actually got 2 articles on technology and how everything is getting better. But let me try to answer your question. Everything is getting better. Have any of you ever had to go to a doctor? Do any of you have to, I'm going to describe the last 4 years of my father-in-law's life. He died in June, but he lived with us. My wife had to take his blood pressure every day. She had to take his blood sugar 3 times a day. And every time she did it, when she first started, she printed out a document. And she would write, you know, January 1, blood pressure, blood reading 1, blood reading 2, blood reading 3. She had columns. And when she would take him to the doctor, she would take it in and she would give the doctor this sheet of paper that had his blood pressure and his blood sugar over the last 3 months. And she did not miss a reading. If he had not lived with us, he could not have had that kind of documentation. He couldn't have done that on his own. He had reached the point where he couldn't do it. All right, the last year or two, my wife never wrote a number down. She put it into her phone. And then she hit a button and printed it out from her phone. All right, get ready. We are this close. You give it 3 years and it will be everywhere, where something about whatever it is they're making will do our blood pressure and our blood sugar without us doing anything. The phone's going to figure it out. It's going to be an app. We'll probably have to roll our thumb over it and it'll do it. And then we don't have to print it out for the doctor. It will send it to the doctor's email so that the doctor can just glance at it. And in fact, when your readings get bad, it'll send a signal to your doctor, call him into the office. And they'll know before you get there exactly what all your vital signs are. So it's getting better. We're going to be able, I'm going to do my best to describe this. How many of you own a car? All right. How many of you have your car sitting unused more than ever before? Why do you own a car? What's the possible reason for you to own a car? You have to pay insurance. You have to keep your car. Why do you own a car? Because you never know when you want to go somewhere. That's why. You might need a car. Well, you've all heard of a company called Uber. U-B-E-R. Let me see if I can describe this. Out of every $100 spent for taxis, everybody got this? Out of every $100 spent for taxis, it is already up to $40 for Uber and $60 for taxis. Uber didn't exist 4 years ago. And now, $40 out of every $100 goes to Uber. Taxi companies are panicking. And what Uber does is, and literally it is this easy, you say into your phone, pick me up at my house at 4 o'clock this afternoon. You just say it, and a car picks you up at 4 o'clock, takes you where you want to go. You don't give them money. You don't pay them a tip. It's already got all that in your credit card and it's prearranged. Now, you don't want to ride Uber on New Year's Eve. And excuse me, that's a phone call that I didn't have turned down. So you don't want to ride Uber on New Year's Eve. This is true. Uber charges more on New Year's Eve than any other time. It's called, what do they call it, surge pricing. So it's a very interesting new development. But let me see if I can describe this. Let's say that you want to hire someone to clean your house. Can you imagine that? You've got somebody hired to clean your house. Do you have any idea how much time it takes to hire somebody to clean your house? You've got to arrange it, you've got to schedule it, you've got to make sure they're good at it, you've got to do all sorts of things. And so hiring somebody to clean your house is a multi-step process. There are now companies, they're doing this with everything. They're doing it in business with marketing experts. They're doing this in business with accounting experts. They're doing this with handymen. There's a company called Handy. But what they're doing is the same thing as Uber. It is using an app on your phone to find somebody to do the job you need now. And everybody's writing, we're only beginning to see the beginning of this. So if you want somebody to clean your house, right now in some cities already, but pretty soon in a lot of cities, you're going to be able to pick up your phone and you're going to be able to say, I want my house clean at 2 o'clock on Monday, and you can relax. Because that company is so reliable, somebody will knock on your door at 2 o'clock on Monday and clean your house. And they've already been vetted as somebody good at it, or they wouldn't be working for the company. You don't have to worry about their name. You know the company. They've got your credit card. There it is. These are the kinds of things that are making the world better. So, is the world getting better? Yes. How's it getting worse? Well, some of the stuff that we thought was going to make things worse is already going away. For example, we are not going to be facing a problem with peak oil because already there are enough electric cars and enough cars that get better gas mileage that we're able to get by on less oil. That's part of the reason why the price of oil is going down. But the big problem is jobs are disappearing. You see, if you work for a taxi company, we're not talking about a job that pays you a fortune. But you work for the company. Your hours are set. You get benefits. You get retirement. You get health care. If you work as your own person, you drive your car for Uber, you only work the hours they call you. If you're really good, you'll get a lot of hours, but you are an independent. And there's a chance you'll never make as much money. This is the big problem. You'll never make as much money as people did 20 or 30 years ago. If you've seen the charts, the middle class income is actually down a little. It's actually down a little. The upper class is doing great, but the middle class is going down, and a whole lot of people are predicting that more and more middle class jobs are in jeopardy. So, it's a very uncertain time for people. So that's kind of my overall technology, oil, world is changing talk for so far today. Who's got other questions? All right?
Well, who's going to start creating jobs for
Well,
people?
we don't know. I mean, she asked who's going to create jobs for those people, and when I tell you that we don't know, I'm going to oversimplify. Let me describe it this way. If your job can be done by a robot or software, it will be done by a robot or software someday. Already, vacuum cleaners are being replaced by little robots. They're called Roombas. And so you now got lots of floors in the country that are cleaned by machine automatically. The only jobs that will exist will be people who are able to tell the machines what to do. That's called computer programmers and code writers. That's why, if you've not seen it, the big word these days in education is STEM. Science, technology, engineering, and math. Don't major in the humanities. Don't major in English. Don't major in the liberal arts. You can't get a job. That's what people are writing. And me, I'm a liberal arts guy. I like the liberal arts. But that's what they're saying. And so if you don't learn how to tell a computer what to do, that's what computer programming and computer coding is. If you don't learn how to do that, you will not have much of a chance at a good job. And the problem is, they think the computers are going to learn how to tell the computers what to do. That's the interesting part. Okay, enough of that. You want to talk about stuff you know about, so here we go. As of today, the Republicans now run the universe. They've got it all. They've got the House of Representatives. They've got the Senate. They've got the district attorney in Dallas. By the way, did you hear about the assistant district attorney who was drunk and basically told the police, "Don't you know who I am?" And that was not a good thing. That's another story. So the Republicans are now in charge. And so Mitch McConnell, who is going to be the majority leader of the Senate, has just given an interview, and this is really fun. I'm going to tell you what he said. This is his words. He said, "Our number one job is this job: don't be scary." Don't be scary. That's what Mitch McConnell himself said. What he said was, we've got to show that we are responsible right middle. So middle of the road, but slightly right. Right middle, governing leaders so that the American people will not be afraid of what we're going to do when we have this much power. Those are his words. Now, if you wonder why he says that, it's because the Republicans have at times been scary. And if you're not aware of this, there may be an attempt to have somebody other than John Boehner be the Speaker of the House. And the man that wants to replace him as the leader of the Republican Party in the House, therefore the Speaker of the House, is a man named Louis, is it one M or two? One. Louis Gohmert from Texas. Louis Gohmert can be scary. He is very, very, very conservative. What we call Tea Party conservative, what we call Tea Party Republican, you could call it what you want, but for those who are not Republican and they think John Boehner is too conservative, they will be glad to have John Boehner as the Speaker of the House if the option is Louis Gohmert. And so this is the battle that's going to be going on. And Mitch McConnell and John Boehner are saying we've got to demonstrate that we can lead this country without going too far to one side or the other. And so since I was last here for current events, there is an incident that has occurred that has been in the news. So let me describe it to you. In the House of Representatives, there is the head position for the party in power. That's the Speaker of the House. And then there is a second position, and this is really embarrassing. I'm drawing a blank on what it's called. But it's the head of the Republican Party within the House. It's the Speaker of the House is theoretically the Speaker of the whole House, theoretically. And then you've got the head of the party, and then the third position is what they call the whip. W-H-I-P. The whip. And the purpose of the whip is to whip everybody into line to vote the way the party wants them to vote. And the more disciplined the party, the better discipline that can be brought by the person in the position of whip, the more the party agenda gets accomplished. There was a time when Tom DeLay was the whip. You remember Tom DeLay? And he was the hammer. He could bring them down. Well, they have just announced the choice for whip, and his name is Steve Scalise, and he is a member of the House of Representatives, Republican, from the state of Louisiana. Now, let me see if I can describe this. Did any of you ever do anything you wish you hadn't done, or at least anything you didn't want your mother to find out about when you were in high school? Let me just see the hands. Come on. All right. So you all did, including our former high school principal here. All right. I did some of that. In the old days, what you did in high school didn't affect you much later. Let me tell you a true story. This is a true story. There was a man in college who one day led a group of other men, this is a true story, and they took a young man in college in their dormitory and held him down and cut off all of his hair and ridiculed him because this young man was gay. And the man who led that effort was a college student named Mitt Romney. Now that's a true story. When Mitt Romney was running for president and that story came out, Mitt Romney never denied it, never admitted it. He simply said, "I don't remember it happening." That's all he said. "I don't remember it happening." But it's clear that he thought it would be a bad idea if he was known as the kind of person who did that. Well, he got lucky. Today, if somebody did that, you know what would happen? Somebody would videotape it. They would take pictures of it and videos of it. And they would put it up on YouTube. Over the last few days, Sarah Palin's son was washing dishes while standing on the family dog. This is the son that has some level of mental challenge. And he was standing on the family dog. Now, I got to tell you, I thought it was kind of an endearing photograph. You know, here's this mentally challenged boy, and he loves his dog, and he's standing on the dog to wash the dishes. It's a big dog. But PETA, the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, have attacked Sarah Palin for mistreating the dog. Now, I don't know if it's okay or not okay to stand on a dog to wash dishes, but Sarah Palin probably wasn't real smart putting that picture on Facebook. Yes?
You have another Palin story before that, when Sarah Palin's daughter got in a drunken fight.
That's exactly right. And Sarah Palin's daughter got in a drunken fight, and there was at that time a police report on it, but not a clear video of the incident. But you're exactly right. Now here's my point. My point, yes ma'am?
How big was the boy that was standing on the dog?
I'm not real good at ages, 7, 8, but he's mentally challenged. He's what we used to call.
But,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, he's a big boy. He wasn't a little boy.
Okay.
He was a big boy. He was hefty. All right. So anyway, I'm saying all of this to say we're living in an era in which whatever you have done will come out. And so here's Steve Scalise. He is the about to be whip of the Republican Party, the majority party in the House of Representatives. And what we now know, and by the way, this was discovered by an SMU law student who then wrote about it, in 1992. That's a fairly long time ago. But in 1992, Steve Scalise was a state representative in Louisiana, and he spoke at a gathering for a white supremacist group. That's a nice way of saying a group that likes the Ku Klux Klan. The man who invited him to speak had been one of the campaign workers for a man running for office in Louisiana named David Duke, who had been a leader in the Ku Klux Klan. So Steve Scalise is speaking at a gathering of a white supremacist group in Louisiana in 1992, and that has now been discovered. Here's what he said about it. He said, "I don't remember that, but I was speaking to a lot of groups then. I would speak to any group that would let me speak about my views on taxes." He was a very conservative man on taxes. Now, I got a question for you. If I were to run for office, and I were to get an invitation to speak to a gathering of members of the American Communist Party, would it be a smart idea for me to speak for them? Even if I don't agree with them, even if all I'm doing is trying to tell them what I think so they'll consider voting for me because they get to vote, the answer is there are some times you just don't speak to a group. But Steve Scalise said, these are his words, "I didn't know who the group was. If I had known that, I would have spoken out against them." So now he's either lying or he was an imbecile,
There you go.
or a little bit of both. And John Boehner has announced that he will stand behind him and beside him and want him in that position. Now, everybody, nobody who is supporting Scalise is defending David Duke or a white supremacist group. But here's the problem for Republicans. I got to say this just right. Let's be honest about this. %, that's 8 out of 10. That's 80 out of 100. 80% of the white voters in many certain key states voted Republican, the people who actually voted, in the last midterm election. The Republican Party owns the white vote in this country. They get the white vote. If you stand up and say, in a serious way, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get the Hispanic vote or the African American vote, if you say that and then you take steps to do it, you're in favor of a path to citizenship for undocumented people, then number one, everybody assumes that you're a Democrat, and number two, plenty of white voters will not vote for you. I just described the American electorate right now. If you're in favor of helping African Americans or Hispanics, you're pretty much considered a Democrat. And if you're in favor of doing only what it takes, let me think how to say this, the bare minimum to help Hispanics and African Americans, the bare minimum, then you're considered a Republican. And basically you never talk about that. And there are enough white voters across the South especially, but not just in the South, but especially across the South, who want to vote for this person. And so, this is a serious comment, if a man is running for office in Louisiana and he wants the white vote, he has to ask some of the people who are aligned with white supremacist groups to vote for them, because there are a lot of people so aligned. So that since this little scandal has become knowledgeable, has become known, David Duke, the David Duke, the former Klansman. Anybody here ever heard of Tony Perkins? Family Research Council. Anybody here ever heard of Tony Perkins, the Family Research Council? He paid $82,000 to David Duke for his mailing list. I'm not making that up. That's known. He paid $82,000 for David Duke's mailing list. So anyway, if you're wanting the vote of white voters, you have to find a way to speak to these people. And so David Duke has said, if anybody slams too hard down on Steve Scalise, any Republicans or even any Democrats, I will release the names of all of the Republicans and Democrats I've met with who have asked for my help. Holy mackerel. There are other Republicans, even some Democrats, who were saying, I don't want it ever known that I spoke to David Duke. So this is a pretty big deal right here. And if you ask me what's going to happen, Scalise will end up being the whip, but does anybody think somebody's going to come up with some video one of these days of him speaking to a group like that 20 years ago? I think so. It's just not there yet. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Now, we're still not to the story you want to talk about, so let me do this quickly in our last few minutes. I'm now ready to tell you that Jeb Bush is running for president. There's basically no doubt about this, and the reason we know that Jeb Bush is running for president is because he is giving up his income, getting ready to run for president. He has been sitting on corporate boards. For example, one of the corporate boards he's been sitting on that paid him hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for sitting on that board was making its money through Obamacare. That is a fact. Jeb Bush was sitting on the board of a healthcare company that was marketing itself to be a supplier for healthcare under Obamacare. Well, he has now quit every corporate board, all of them, so that it will have, this is almost his exact words, no appearance of conflict. So Jeb Bush, I'm now ready to tell you, is running for president. He's running for president. On the Democratic side, I think everybody's still in pretty firm agreement that Hillary Clinton is running for president. Now, on the Republican side, you've got what I'll call the more conservatives. They are, and there are many, Ted Cruz. Mike Huckabee has just gotten rid of his income. He was making money by appearing on Fox News. And everybody assumes that Mike Huckabee is getting ready to run for president. You've got Bobby Jindal, you've got Chris Christie, you've got Marco Rubio, you've got Rick Perry, you've got Ted Cruz. I'm sure that I'm forgetting some. And then you've also got the doctor. What's his name?
Carson.
No, not you've got Rand Paul.
Carson, Dr. Carson.
Carson, Ben Carson. So you've got this long list, but there are a lot of people who are saying it's practically a done deal. If Jeb Bush is actually running, he's going to get the nomination. I still think Ted Cruz is going to give him a real run for his money. But if you want my opinion, I don't think any of these others have a chance against Bush, but I could be wrong. On the Democratic side, you've actually got two people much further liberal, more liberal than Hillary Clinton. You've got, you've got three. You've got people who want to draft Elizabeth Warren, the junior senator from Massachusetts. You've got a man named Jim Webb, who's an interesting mix of conservative, liberal Democrat. And then you've got, and this is more complicated, a man that is likely to run for president. This is almost now a done deal. as an independent. He is a sitting U.S. Senator and is, in fact, a socialist. He's the only socialist in the U.S. Senate. His name is Bernie Sanders. He's the senator from Vermont. And so you've got these three that are trying to push Clinton more progressive. You've got these many that are going to want to push Jeb Bush more conservative. But I think if you corner me now, it's going to be Clinton versus Bush.
Where's Biden?
Biden, let me think how to word this. I think Biden will be smart enough at the end of the process, at the beginning of the end of the prior process, to know that he can't win. I could be wrong about that. Biden would definitely run if there was no Hillary Clinton ready to run. But I think he knows he can't beat Hillary. But I could be wrong about that. Yes.
What happened to Scott Walker?
Well, Scott Walker's another one to put over here on this list, and there's nothing happened to him. I just, in my opinion, as you look at this long list of Republican hopefuls, in my view, I could be wrong. There are some who would argue that Rand Paul has a real shot. There are some who would argue that Mike Huckabee has something of a shot. There are certainly some that think Chris Christie has a shot. There are certainly some that Scott Walker has a shot. In my view, it's going to come down between Ted Cruz and Jeb Bush. I could be wrong about that. I could be wrong about that. And on the Democratic side, it's going to come down to Hillary Clinton and nobody else if she runs. That's my view. Yes?
Question. What's the current health condition of Harry Reid?
Harry Reid took a tumble. He was on his exercise equipment and he hit the equipment and the floor, and he broke some bones in his face and broke some ribs. He's supposed to be in the Senate tomorrow. I don't think it's serious. I think it's painful and I think it's embarrassing, but I don't think it's serious. Well, that's current events for today. I'll be back in 2 weeks for current events, and I'll be back a week from Wednesday for a reading group. We're going to read 2 essays, and Matt will have them for you. We invite you to do it. We do that in the library. But as you all know, nothing that I said matters today. The only thing we care about is, will the Cowboys beat the Packers? I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.